We are in crisis.
Because the planet is in crisis.
The environmental disasters that we are facing are not going to stop.
And in the face of disaster, we need a proven solution.
We, the working class, need to organize.
Because everything we have, we won by fighting.
During the Great Depression, it was trade unionists and socialists who organized to win the New Deal.
During World War II, it was that same labor movement
that created the arsenal of democracy and defeated the Nazis.
But since then, the labor movement has lost power.
Weakened by neoliberal forces
who see empowered workers as a threat to their profits.
We are in crisis.
Because now the world faces another existential threat.
Fossil fuel capitalists and the politicians they own
are standing between us and survival.
Between us and a better world.
We need to remember.
To remember the history of our movement.
And to restore its power.
It's time to pass the PRO Act.
To strengthen unions and put power back into the hands of the American worker.
To build a movement strong enough.
To once again defeat the forces that threaten us.
And to ensure our survival.
By winning a Green New Deal.
And creating millions of good union jobs.
We, the working class, are in crisis.
And we will meet it like we always have, by fighting together.
Hello, comrades. It's so amazing to see so many folks already. We are over 1,000 now, and we have more people joining every second. I'm Thea Riofrancos, and I serve on DSA's Green New Deal campaign committee. I'm thrilled to welcome everyone to the kickoff event for our campaign to pass the PRO Act, which will dismantle decades of corporate assault on labor rights and pave the way for a renewed labor movement ready to fight for the Green New Deal and more. The Protecting the Right to Organize Act, or the PRO Act, would make it easier to organize workplaces across the country. It would grant labor rights to millions of workers who are currently misclassified, legalize secondary and solidarity strikes, and reverse so-called right-to-work laws. All of these would particularly benefit workers of color, undocumented workers, and working women whose essential labor keeps our society going. This is DSA's largest ever virtual event, which just goes to show the excitement among our members and chapters to take part in a historic struggle for labor rights and a livable planet. We have a fantastic lineup today with special guests from the labor and climate movement, a DSA endorsed member of Congress, and DSA organizers from around the country. We will show that in the past and in the present, we only win what we deserve through militant movements that mobilize and organize the multiracial working class. We'll discuss why DSA has prioritized the PRO Act, how it unites eco-socialists and labor organizers, what the timeline is to win, and how chapters are building relationships with union locals and coordinating our efforts on the ground. We'll close out by asking you to join us and showing you how you can get involved starting today. This is an all hands on deck moment, and we need every one of our 92,000 members and 400 local bodies engaged so we can win. To that end, we are going to launch a poll, which will pop up in the Zoom right now, which will ask you about your role in your DSA chapter and how many union members we have present. And if you are not a DSA member yet, there is also a link in the chat so you can join us and join the struggle to pass the PRO Act today. So without further ado, I have the great honor of introducing our very first guest speaker. Naomi Klein is an author, an activist, and a filmmaker known for her inspiring and constant advocacy for a just transition and a transformative Green New Deal. Naomi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Thea, and everyone at DSA who's put together this incredible kickoff event. Welcome, everyone. It is wild to see so many of you with us today. And I have to tell you that it's a little bit of a dream come true for me. For so long, way too long, actually, there was this idea on the left that the climate crisis wasn't central to our work, that leftists were the ones fighting on the front lines of urgent needs, workers' rights, housing, battling the barbarism of austerity and privatization and state violence. Climate breakdown for a long time seemed like the one thing we didn't have to worry about, that the big green groups had it covered. But that was never true. Green groups may be able to protect a particular piece of wilderness or win a narrow anti-pollution policy. But climate breakdown isn't that kind of crisis. It's a structural crisis, one that flows directly from a logic that treats the natural world as a sphere of God-given limitless domination and extraction for a small ownership class. It's the very same logic that treats workers' bodies and workers' time as a sphere of God-given limitless domination and extraction for a small ownership class. I sometimes call this the dig and gig economy. This ruthless logic has ruled our world for so long that we find ourselves not on the precipice of crisis, but fully within its grips. Daily life around the world is being ravaged by the entirely predictable and predicted consequences of the devouring of the natural world to feed the voracious appetites of transnational capital. The devouring of wild landscapes has put so much pressure on habitats that deadly diseases now jump with ever greater frequency from animals to humans. The COVID-19 pandemic is one result. It will not be the last. The unearthing of long buried carbon to power our electricity grids and transportation networks has led to the trapping of so much heat in our atmosphere that carbon sequestering forests are burning from the Arctic to the Amazon. And both cold and hot storms batter our communities. There, they meet infrastructure that has been long neglected and left to decay by a half a century of neoliberal austerity, privatization, and deregulation, all part of a bloody-minded elite effort to wage war on the original New Deal. Our governments have known about this crisis since well before I was born, and yet they have chosen not only to do nothing, but to double down on the underlying drivers of the climate crisis, to accelerate the most wasteful and polluting forms of production and consumption. To call it negligent is far too kind. They are arsonists on a planetary scale, arsonists of our collective future, and they know it. That is why the richest men in this depraved system are spending their billions now on dreams of escaping to outer space. The rest of us are stuck down here, scorched by the multiple and overlapping fires that they lit. And of course, we are not equally close to the flames. Under capitalism, wealth buys protection. And under racial capitalism, the people with the least protection are overwhelmingly Black, Indigenous, and migrant communities. So while the billionaires buy gilded bunkers and dabble in space travel, the more average rich have the option to make like Ted Cruz and book a ticket to stay at the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun when the lights go off in Texas. So no, we cannot leave climate to the big green groups funded by liberal foundations and guilt-ridden hedge fund executives, because climate change itself is class war, and only a resurgent left led by a mobilized and empowered and radicalized working class can fight back, which is why we are all here, to make sure Congress passes the PRO Act so we can win a Green New Deal and win a future not just better than climate apocalypse, but far better than the status quo gig and dig economy. A present that treats both the natural world and its human and non-human inhabitants as raw resources, mine sites from which to extract value and leave toxic wreckage behind. Many of you know that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's landmark report, 1.5 report in 2018 stated that if we want to prevent truly catastrophic warming or to have a decent chance of it, we need to slash global emissions in half in 12 years. That was 3 years ago. In the report, they said that it was possible to do this, but only with fundamental transformations of virtually every aspect of society. And it went on to list them: energy, transportation, agriculture, building construction, and of course, our consumption patterns. Now, when this report came out in 2018, it was terrifying for a lot of liberals because they subscribe to a view of environmentalism that asks the question, as Arundhati Roy has put it, how do we change without changing? But as leftists, as democratic eco-socialists, we know that the status quo wasn't working with or without warming temperatures. And with so many crises hitting at once and intersecting into a giant social and economic conflagration, more and more people understand this right alongside with us. And that is why our elites are so terrified of a Green New Deal. You know, when the storm hit in Texas and the power went out, we saw this spectacle of Greg Abbott and Rick Perry and others coming out, blaming the Green New Deal and frozen wind turbines and AOC. And, you know, I observed at the time that this was really striking because I've been studying disasters, as many of you know, for a long time. And when I wrote the shock doctrine, that was because when moments like that storm would happen in the past, immediately these figures would be going out there with their wish lists of new things to privatize and deregulate and new forms of austerity that they wanted. And this was based on the adopting Milton Friedman's credo that only a crisis, real or perceived, produces real change. And when that crisis occurs, the change depends on the ideas that are lying around. But when that storm hit Texas, what became very clear is that their ideas are no longer lying around. They're lying in ruin all around us. And so what they did is launched a preemptive strike on what they are truly afraid of, which is the Green New Deal, because they know that only a vision of its scale offers any hope of a response to the overlapping crises that so many millions are facing right now. Yes, it is a plan to listen to those scientists and get off fossil fuels in the next decade, because that is the major driver of that kind of extreme weather. But it's also a plan to deal with the neglected infrastructure so that it can withstand the shocks that are already locked in. And first and foremost, it is a jobs plan, but not a plan to create any old jobs, a plan to create good unionized jobs. And that is why uniting to win the PRO Act and then the Green New Deal is finally going to explode the climate versus jobs myth that has damaged us so much in the past. And I'm so glad that Representative Bowman is here with us because he is doing so much work right now to connect the dots between the need for care work to be recognized as low carbon work, to be recognized as climate work, and for that work to be protected, unionized, and cherished. Under a Green New Deal, this is what we would be doing. And it is a plan to address the inequalities and injustices of the original New Deal, the exclusions of the original New Deal, which left out care workers, which left out agricultural workers, and which sacrificed so many frontline communities. They are scared of the Green New Deal because the Green New Deal was custom built for a moment like ours. It takes both inspiration and warnings from the original New Deal, which was rolled out in another time of intersecting crisis, the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, and also health crises and pandemics like TB, which was spreading rapidly in the 1930s. The extent to which it won its most lasting victories and most important progressive victories is not because of enlightened elites. It was because workers organized, because socialists organized, because neighborhoods organized. The Green New Deal is not a narrow climate policy. It is a plan for the next economy, a plan that moves us from an economy based on digging and gigging to an economy that is based on care and repair. Our task is not easy, but our mission is clear. It is to solve our climate and economic crises, and for that, we need a Green New Deal. To win a Green New Deal, we need mass worker power. And to build mass worker power, we need to pass the PRO Act. Our opponents are out of ideas. This is our time. Let's seize it.
Thank you so much for that fantastic introduction, Naomi. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashik Siddiq. I am on the campaign committee of DSA's Green New Deal campaign and PRO Act campaign. And I'm just going to add a little more context from what Naomi fantastically laid out. I apologize for this image that I'm showing you that might be somewhat disturbing for those of you who've been paying attention to climate politics. But I'm putting it up because Biden is now 2 months into his presidency, and in many ways, he campaigned promising to be the strongest climate president ever and the most pro-union president ever. And in his first few weeks, he has taken a bunch of meaningful steps. He's re-entered the Paris Climate Agreement. He's canceled the Keystone Pipeline, made a bunch of commitments that are good things that reestablished the status quo of President Obama's presidency at the end of 2016. Now, there are a number of promises that are meaningful that have yet to be fulfilled. We may see big stimulus bills, infrastructure bills, as soon as a few months from now, that could commit trillions of dollars to green infrastructure, which means the entire physical landscape of this country could be reshaped over the next decade based on what happens this year. But there are some really big questions around what that investment is going to be put into. On what terms will the investments be made? Will they go to capitalists like Elon Musk and Tesla and Uber and Lyft, as Naomi suggested, who are promising to green capitalism while they also lobby to bust down labor rights for millions of workers, while they make plans to move to Mars or just implement some kind of eco-apartheid with gated communities for the few while the many are left to just deal with the consequences? Will it find new ways to exploit workers in frontline communities within US borders and across the global south? Or could it actually help build working class power in the US and around the world to help actually deal with the climate crisis and also repair the ongoing harms of capitalism and colonialism? Whether or not that happens is contingent on a lot of things. These investments could be made in ways that actually don't solve the climate crisis and actually make a number of things worse unless people are prepared to contest them. So how do we build the power to actually make what we want possible? These are massive challenges. How do we get from where we are to the world we want, as Naomi laid out? How do we focus and organize our power in the short term this year to build our national infrastructure within DSA and across many organizations to win real victories and lay the groundwork to organize for much more radical goals in the years ahead? So to answer that question, it's important to look at our history. This is a chart that shows strike actions over the past 100 years. And if you look at the timeline at the bottom, which starts in 1919 and throughout the 1930s, these are the years of the New Deal throughout the 1930s, which is when major victories were won for workers because of militant organized labor, making radical demands and organizing the masses to the extent that capitalists had to compromise for fear of actual revolution. And as these victories were won from year to year, workers kept raising expectations and getting even more organized for even more expansive demands. They were not complacent or pacified. And of course, there are many things that did not happen through the New Deal. Jim Crow is left intact. There are many battles that kept having to be fought for decades, and many of them are still not fulfilled. And in the decades since then, as you can see, there was a rapid drop-off throughout World War II and the subsequent decades, which is when labor has been on the defensive, especially since the 1970s and 80s, under attack by corporate power and neoliberal government. And the labor movement has been historically weak for a number of years now. But one statistic that is somewhat hopeful is that unionization rates are actually pretty comparable to what they were at the beginning of the Great Depression, which is when mass worker action increased dramatically. So if we want a Green New Deal, it's really important to rebuild the capacity and reverse some of the major setbacks that labor has suffered for the past few decades. And if we can rebuild that capacity, that could really open up a major political landscape for winning much bigger victories. So this is just a little bit about just how the current crisis of the past year has been changing things very quickly. One excellent recent example is how workers in New York City organized a major strike just in the past few months to demand raises and protections on the job at great personal risk. And many organizations, including DSA, turned out to provide strike support for these workers. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had a great quote about how this is just the beginning of a much larger labor movement in this country that fights for the rights of all people and fights for the rights of all workers. And much more of this is what's necessary to lay the groundwork for the decade of a Green New Deal. And we can keep winning against incredible odds if we organize real working class solidarity. We have massive openings to reshape the entire physical and political landscape of American society this decade, but it's up to us to build power, working class power, socialist power, to form the backbone to win a real Green New Deal. And rebuilding labor power is a necessary precondition of this, which is why the PRO Act, protecting the right to organize, is such a high priority for DSA right now and for organized labor. This is something that many establishment Democrats, including Joe Biden, have made commitments to, and many powerful unions are on board, but these are largely verbal commitments. We've seen just in the past few weeks that Democrats in the Senate have thrown out procedural excuses not to push forward on basic commitments like the Fight for 15, which are overwhelmingly popular, but they need to be something needs to happen to change this dynamic where they keep making excuses not to do things that are popular and necessary. So a lot of organizing is necessary to pass something like the PRO Act, especially as opposition ramps up from organized capitalists. So I'm going to hand it off now to Blanca to tell us more about what conditions are like for workers and why we need to organize for this.
Hi, y'all. I'm Blanca Esteves. I serve on the National Political Committee of DSA, our highest governing body, and I'm a member of the Northwest Arkansas chapter. According to the 2019 American Community Survey by the Census Bureau, the Department of Homeland Security announced that 69% of undocumented immigrant workers hold jobs that are deemed essential. It is estimated that undocumented immigrants comprise up to 11% of agriculture workers, up to 2% of healthcare workers, and up to 6% of food service workers and production workers. The study also found that 70% of the immigrants working in essential jobs have lived in the US for more than 10 years. In Arkansas, a right-to-work state, poultry is the leading agricultural industry, providing over 163,000 jobs. Over 6,500 farms in Arkansas produce some type of poultry. Northwest Arkansas, particularly Washington and Benton counties, produce the most poultry in my state. Poultry plants continue to exploit immigrants in numerous ways because the bosses see the workers as disposable. But the PRO Act would get rid of this dehumanizing practice. By the way, both Tyson and Walmart World headquarters are located in Northwest Arkansas. One of the most important points of the PRO Act is that it closes the worker misclassification loophole. Millions of workers, from gig workers like Uber and Lyft to construction workers to truck drivers and so on, are misclassified. There's a lot of reasons for this, but ultimately it drives down the cost for the employer. They don't have to pay payroll taxes, they don't have to extend benefits, and it reduces their liability because these workers aren't under their direct control if they are classified as a 1099. From the workers' point of view, this means they are not workers. They are a small business. They have no labor rights, and it is illegal under the National Labor Relations Act for them to attempt to unionize or engage in collective bargaining because that is essentially a monopolistic practice. This also allows the employer to exploit them in ways that are extreme, even for the average worker. In construction, there is a reason that these workers tend to be undocumented. This gives multiple points of leverage on them from their employer. It makes it effectively impossible for them to organize and gives the employer a massive incentive to steal their wages because undocumented people are not entitled to back wages under the 2002 Hoffman Plastics compound decision. It is effectively an unpunishable crime to steal wages from undocumented workers in this country. The PRO Act fixes this too. So basically, the PRO Act fixes a lot of things that are among the most oppressive and morally reprehensible things happening to workers today. It is imperative that DSA fight for these reforms because these are the exact people we need in DSA to win international socialism. Fighting for the PRO Act is an opportunity to highlight just how terrible conditions are for workers today. And PRO does a very good job at fixing a lot of them. It gives us room to breathe and room to organize in ways that we couldn't before. And it allows us to demonstrate that we care about these workers and understand what they face every day at work. PROACT is our first step to creating a better world, and I hope you'll join up and sign up with us today, because we're coming to unionize Walmart, Tyson, and every workplace in this country. So I am so proud to introduce Jamal Bowman to y'all, an educator elected to the US House of Representatives in 2020 to fight for us and New York's 16th Congressional District, and newest member of the squad. Jamal, hi.
What's up? What's up? What's up? How we doing? How we doing? How we doing? Looking good, sounding good, feeling good. Let's go DSA. Let's go past the PROACT. Let's go end the filibuster. Let's go unionize every worker in this country. Let's unionize every worker across the world. Let's get to net zero carbon emissions in the next 10 years. Let's pass a Green New Deal. Let's do what we gotta do for our country, for our children, for our grandchildren, for our workers who have been left out for far too long. We're talking about our health aides, our care workers, our nurses, our teachers, our early childhood providers. Let's create hundreds of thousands of new jobs, and let's make sure none of them are in the fossil fuel industry, not one. Let's be innovative, let's be creative, let's be visionary. Let's continue to do the work that we have been doing, that you all have been doing for the last several decades. This is not a moment, this is a movement. I'm so proud, so humbled, so honored to be in Congress, working with you, fighting alongside of you, hitting the ground running, and doing what's necessary. Let me give a huge shout out to Naomi Klein for her inspiration and her vision and her brilliance and her leadership. I knew about Naomi in my time, during my time in education as a teacher and principal, and just to be here with her, working in collaboration with her, is incredibly beautiful. I don't know if you all saw, but just last week, we released our Care for All agenda, our Care for All resolution. This is a resolution to create millions of jobs in the care industry that will not contribute to the carbon footprint. The care industry is mostly women, so it's a women's rights issue. It's mostly women of color, so it's a racial justice issue. And it's also an issue of reparations. And here's what I mean by that. Our care workers have been left out. Our farm workers, our domestic workers, our health aides, they've been left out of the American dream. They have not been allowed to organize and unionize. They have not been allowed to earn a living wage. This is completely unacceptable, and this is why the PROACT is so critical. Now, let me tell you right now, I can guarantee, almost guarantee, the PROACT is going to pass the House. It will pass the House, but we cannot let it get stuck in the Senate. And the only way to stop that, one of the main ways to stop that, is to end the filibuster. The filibuster has to be ended as far as we know it. Why? Because we will continue to pass excellent legislation in the House, and it will continue to not move in the Senate because of the filibuster. It needs to be reformed, it needs to be changed, it needs to be ended. So thank you all so much for the work that you do. I'm a proud paying dues member of DSA. Let's get it going. We have to reform our country. We have to build back better. For me, is about the rebirth of America in all of our images, not in the image of old white men. No offense to the old white men out there. I know many of you are progressive and you've been doing the work since the civil rights movement, but you know what I mean. We need women at the table. We need the LGBTQ community at the table. We need African Americans at the table. We need West Indians at the table, indigenous people at the table, Latinos at the table, the poor at the table, people who have been marginalized and disenfranchised. Our work is targeting red line communities who have been harmed by elected officials and harmed by policy. And I want to say this. This was done on purpose. This was not by accident. This concentration of political power in the hands of a few of a financial and economic power in the hands of a few, while the rest of us suffer, while the rest of us are forced to be crabs in a barrel, climbing over each other and killing each other just for basic survival. This was by design. This was on purpose. Our unions have been under attack for decades, starting even before Ronald Reagan, but Ronald Reagan is the tipping point to much of this. And that's why we have to reclaim our power as people. I was so happy to be in Alabama on Friday, so humbled to be in Alabama, listening to Amazon workers who want to unionize, listening, learning, and understanding what they're going through. And it's so similar to what happens in education. They're trying to turn us into widgets and take our humanity. They just want us to work in these boxes and monitor every second and every single thing we do. And the minute we're off task, we get a demerit so they can fire us and open up more private industry. It happened in education. It's still happening with this charter school movement. That's why we got to shut down this charter school movement. We got to uplift our schools, uplift our teachers, pass a Green New Deal. We can do it. Look at how far we've come already. Look at how far we've come. Look at what we forced the Biden administration to do as soon as that. First of all, there would have never been a Bernie Biden coalition if it wasn't for your work. Secondly, it wouldn't be a $2 trillion investment in green jobs with 40% focused on communities of color if it wasn't for your work. This wouldn't be in place. But $2 trillion is the floor and not the ceiling. We got to go bigger than that. We got to go much bigger than that. And, you know, we can make the economic argument. All of this is better for the economy long term, but it's better for our humanity. Let's stop killing each other. Let's stop killing ourselves. Let's stop killing someone in another country because of their race or gender or religion or class or difference. I'm tired of that nonsense. Let's love each other and uplift each other and come together in joy. Imagine what the human race can do if we stop fighting each other. I'm so excited to be on this journey with you. Let's continue to uplift each other, keep the movement going, put pressure on the Senate and the filibuster so we could do what we have to do for our country and for our planet. And for my daughter who's 6, who God willing will have children of her own if she chooses to, that I'll be able to raise and love. And let's just continue to uplift each other. Thank you all so much.
Woohoo!
Hey everyone, that's a tough act to follow. My name is Ryan Kekaris, and I'm a member and organizer with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, and I'm a member of Baltimore DSA. So it's a tremendous honor for me to speak to you all on this call. It's very hard for me to put into words how proud and humbled I am that DSA is playing such a leading role in the fight for the massive and historic undertaking of labor law reform. Let me tell you a little bit about my story. So I'm a proud trade unionist, and because I'm a trade unionist, I belong to DSA. I've been a member of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades for nearly a decade, through the Obama and Trump years, and now to the Biden years. My political upbringings trace back to when I was a boy living as a tenant on a tobacco farm in Southern Virginia, and I would see migrant workers each year come in for a few weeks in early spring to plant, and then again into the late summer to harvest. The work they did was grueling and dangerous, and they moved in and out of our tiny little town each year, and no one ever talked about them or acknowledged them as people, only as part of a cycle that had been going on for hundreds of years and would continue on into the future forever. I am a unionist and socialist because I believe that we have the power to change that. I've been working myself since I was 16 years old, in kitchens and warehouses, as a delivery driver, as a construction worker. I firmly believe that there is no better introduction into socialism than to work. And I think right now, there are millions of workers out there who experience what Marx and Lenin wrote about. We don't have to communicate that to them because they face it every day. Our task is to show them that DSA is their political home and that we are fighting to liberate their coworkers and communities from those realities. So I began working at a Walmart distribution center when I was 17 years old. My salary was $5.15 per hour. The first thing they had me do during orientation was watch a video around the perils of unionizing. Within 6 months of that, I considered myself a socialist. My union began the campaign around the PRO Act because we have been trying to organize workers who each and every day are brutalized by the failures of U.S. labor law. These people have virtually no rights at all. They're considered aliens by the very country they are building, and they face deportation in cages if they attempt to organize because their employers have an entire government agency, ICE, at their disposal with a simple phone call. As I'm speaking to you now, I'm thinking of those workers in the fields and in the construction projects and in those warehouses. The goals of this campaign aren't simply to pass the PRO Act. Our goals are to let each and every one of them know that there's a movement that is fighting for them, and that movement needs them among our ranks. It is also important to say that this isn't a DSA campaign or a union campaign. This is a workers' campaign, with the largest and most potent political project for the working class in my lifetime, sitting hand in hand with construction unions, communications unions, and climate justice organizations who collectively represent millions of workers. This is a campaign of class struggle. That is an incredible achievement and a testament to the organizing, recruitment, and campaigning the DSA has done. That we are even in this position is a victory that a few years back, I'm not sure I could have ever dreamed of. Even at the height of the New Deal or at the apex of 20th century socialism, did we have such an alliance develop? It is my firm belief that the labor movement today is more in sync with DSA than at any point in our history. We have an opportunity right in front of us to demonstrate to millions of people that we are a force to be reckoned with, one that has the power to change our country and the world. Our task is to set the pace for this campaign, to push the labor movement forward, to mobilize and organize each and every one of our comrades to be leaders and to be champions for working people. Our task is to work hand in hand with union members, leaders, and organizers across movements who see worker power as fundamental to building political power, and the 90% of workers in this country who are outside organized labor, to show them the DSA is a deeply serious project and organization that they have a political home with us. Their home is with us because we fight for them when no one else will. We know the political realities we are operating in. We just saw how the Senate treated a $15 minimum wage and expanded unemployment. This fight to pass the PRO Act is different. We aren't going to wage it in the halls of Congress. We are going to wage it in the streets and in the communities that these politicians supposedly represent. This campaign is taking that fight straight to the Democratic Party. We're going to raise hell and organize workers into DSA, into unions, and into the political arena, because it will surely take a mass movement of workers to get the PRO Act anywhere close to becoming law. My union recognized that after the failures of the Employee Free Choice Act, we had to make sure that this fight around labor law was a public fight and set the terms of the engagement. DSA is now in a position to set those terms. I am speaking to you today because I want to ask you a very familiar question. Will you fight for someone you don't know? That is what this campaign is about. The PRO Act would transform what it means to organize in this country and would open the floodgates for a variety of tactics, strikes, and opportunities that we can only dream of right now. These are rights that our grandparents had and rights that built the labor movement into what you see today. We have a chance to win those rights back, and DSA has a chance to lead that fight. We know that our task is to change history. This fight ahead of us can break the cycle of nameless and faceless workers trapped forever in a social order in which it is possible for one man who does absolutely nothing that is useful to amass a fortune of hundreds of millions of dollars, while millions of men and women who work all the days of their lives secure barely enough for a wretched existence. Eugene Debs wrote that over 100 years ago, and those migrant workers that I grew up watching every year are still out there. I'm fighting to pass the PRO Act for them. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm very proud to hand it off to my comrade, Evlando.
Thank you, Ryan. Hello, y'all. My name is Evlando Cooper, and I'm a proud member of Tacoma DSA. As Ryan alluded to, the PRO Act is also the first step towards the decade of the Green New Deal. It will unshackle workers from the most anti-union laws in the developed world and enable massive growth and unionization. But we won't just pass the PRO Act and go home. As someone born and raised in New Orleans, I witnessed the devastation of Hurricane Katrina firsthand. It was a climate disaster that changed the trajectory of my life and the lives of nearly everyone in the city. So this is just the first strategic step in a long-term campaign for a Green New Deal, leading straight into the fights for a green public bailout and a green jobs guarantee. The most effective attacks on the climate movement center around a dishonest narrative that pits climate action against the labor movement and jobs. Although the actual conflicts between the two are overstated, we cannot afford any division in our ranks during the most important battle of our lifetimes. The policies for better workplaces and for a better world are one and the same. The Green New Deal is a better deal for workers and for the planet. We can only win a Green New Deal with a combination of labor militancy and climate activism, interwoven and in solidarity with one another. It's the only way to beat the fossil fuel industry's divide and conquer tactics. Working to pass the PRO Act with our comrades in DSLC and with a broader labor-led coalition will deepen our relationships with the labor movement at the local and national level, and the coalition and help build the coalition we need to win transformative victories on behalf of workers and on behalf of the planet we all share. And with that, I will pass it on to my comrade Sid, who will speak more about our campaign timeline and the plan to win. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evlondo. I really appreciate that. And for you sharing why workers and the world need to unite in this fight for the PRO Act, a Green New Deal, and a future that belongs to us all. So my name is Sydney, and I'm proud to serve on the DSA Green New Deal campaign and DSA PRO Act campaign committees. And I'm so excited to be here with you tonight. And I'm excited to share what we have in store for the next few months and how each and every one of us can plug in. So we have a jam-packed campaign timeline through May, and we're already started. So back in December, about 30 chapters had already taken action to pressure Congress to fight for our lives and included the PRO Act among their demands. For the last month, we've been preparing for the campaign as chapters around the country were already taking action, and we officially launched this week, and this webinar is part of the DSA PRO Act campaign launch. As we all know, the House vote is this week, and we encourage folks to keep up the pressure by sending letters to your rep, joining CWA phone banks, and making sure our representatives vote in support of the PRO Act and in the interests of the working class. But the campaign is just getting started, and once we ensure the PRO Act passes the House, we're going to escalate pressure on the Senate for the next few months. On March 14th, we're launching weekly trainings to help chapters prepare to take action around the country. And we'll also have a special training for DSA union members. Throughout April, well, before April actually, on March 21st, we're launching phone banks so we can talk to voters in key states and pour hundreds of thousands of calls into senators' offices. In early April, while the Senate is on recess, we're encouraging you to kick off actions around the country. And then throughout April, we'll keep building pressure with more actions, town halls, phone banks, media campaigns, and through outreach to our unions, co-workers, and community orgs as we build momentum for nationwide May Day action. So there's obviously a lot going on, but don't worry, we've got absolutely everything you need to plug into this campaign. So the PRO Act Chapter Campaign Guide is a one-stop shop for everything you need to participate. This toolkit includes guides on organizing your union, bringing your non-union coworkers into the campaign, organizing town halls, a social media toolkit, graphics, messaging guide, and sign-up links for phone banks, action trainings, and PRO Act campaign trainings for union members. We also have a step-by-step guide with details for organizing a PRO Act campaign in your DSA chapter. To preview, these are what the steps include. First, figuring out your chapter's campaign targets, which will determine the type of action your chapter will want to take. The next speaker will actually talk a little bit more about the specific states we're targeting, so just keep that in mind. The second step is getting your DSA chapter on board. Tons of chapters have already started organizing this campaign, and yours can too. So this section of the guide will provide some guidance on getting them on board. This third step is making a plan, which includes making a campaign committee and planning your chapter's activities. The fourth step is outreach. So having DSA members reach out to their unions, co-workers, community partners, friends, family, and more. And of course, the fifth step is taking action, whether that's organizing chapters participation in a phone bank, direct action at Congress members' offices, town halls, or nationwide May Day actions. In addition to this, just so you all know, we'll be reaching out to chapter leads to establish chapter phone bank leads, action leads, and union leads so we can keep providing ongoing support. And you can get the full guide and all the tools you need for this campaign by signing up at bit.ly/ProActSignup. So I want you to take a moment to think about why you're here and why you're part of this campaign. I want you to take a moment to think about who you're fighting for. And I do hope that you're willing to fight for someone you don't know. And I hope one of the people you're also fighting for is you. Because whether you're a union member, a climate activist, immigrant, community organizer, DSA member, future DSA member, or a worker that's just trying to get by in a hostile economy, this fight is for you. Because this is a fight for the entire working class, a fight to take our power back from the capitalists and CEOs that are exploiting workers and polluting the planet. And everyone has a role to play. We'll be working in DSA chapters and with our partners to escalate pressure on specific Congress members around the country. Whether you live in those areas or not, you can support those chapters and organizers there by reaching out and participating in phone banks while organizers are there carrying out on the ground work. If you live in an area where your reps and senators have already signed on to the PRO Act, you need to push them to be champions for the working class. We need to be pushing the question, which side are you on, and heightening the expectations of our elected officials. And everyone, absolutely everyone, has a role in bringing in and building an organized working class movement capable of winning the PRO Act. Union members should work with their unions to join the fight. All workers should invite their coworkers to participate in phone banks and actions. DSA members should make sure the new DSA members that joined last year are plugged in. And everyone should bring their friends, families, neighbor, and community members in this fight. And wherever you are, you can build momentum and help us win by joining phone banks, organizing town halls, and gearing up for nationwide actions on May Day. A little later, we'll talk about the very next step everyone can take. But first, I'm going to pass it on to DSA member and labor organizer, Daniel Dominguez.
Thank you for that, Sydney. So hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you. So my name's Daniel. I'm from LA, and I'm currently serving on the steering committee for the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission. So at the DSLC, we guide DSA's orientation to labor organizing. So this is my day-to-day stuff in DSA. So for that reason and so many more, I'm honored to be here with you all to get ready to fight for the PRO Act. So today I'm going to be covering the labor organizing aspect of this campaign. So as a union organizer in the healthcare industry, the passage of the PRO Act would significantly reshape the conditions for the workers I organize with. I've seen so many union organizing efforts end before they even really started because someone got cold feet, someone heard that they'll lose their job, or because of any other of the several barriers workers face when organizing. Those of us in the labor movement know that worker inaction stems from the very real fear that the boss will oftentimes do whatever it takes to make sure that the workers don't have a union. So having the PRO Act would give workers the confidence that their basic rights are protected by the law with real penalties for employers who violate it. It would also give them the hope that union recognition and a fair contract are not just a long shot. So right now, workers understand and often make the rational calculation that existing labor law has been stacked entirely in the favor of employers. So the PRO Act truly is a once in a generation opportunity to reform the law that could transform the workers' movement in this country. So as part of this campaign, we really want any chapter and members to focus on recruiting union members. And I'm going to go into why that's such an important constituency in this campaign. So while union membership is not what it was in the early 20th century, an era that saw incredible levels of militant union activity, unions are still one of the most important working class institutions that we have. Even in periods when the class struggle is low, labor unions are there on the front lines, making sure that workers have a way to fight the boss. When you're in a union, knowing that your workers, that your coworkers are standing with you makes the difference between demanding more and accepting what you've been given. Because with the union, you have the power of the collective. When you're in a union, you know you'll have a steward at your side when you get called into the office. It means you'll be standing side by side with countless others when you're on the picket line. And it means you have the power to fight for a better life. And that's why unions are so powerful and such a crucial part of this campaign. Unions are made up of workers who know the meaning of solidarity. So if you're excited about this campaign but don't know where to start by mapping your chapter, right? Any good organizer knows the importance of lists. It's how we map our workplace, our campaigns, and our chapters. So chapters, our amazing team, data team at the national organization has been working hard to get every chapter their union data that is collected every time someone signs up or renews their dues. But you may need to do some legwork to complete the data. So Figure out which of the members in your chapter belong to unions, which have a staff position, and which are on their union's retiree committee. So in Los Angeles, one of the ways we've done this is by launching a socialist workplace survey that's allowed us to collect that data and understand where in the labor movement or in the relevant industries our members are situated. So once you've done that, you begin to understand where your chapter has power. And DSA chapters need to tap into that power by talking to unions and local labor federations, because that's the only way we're going to see the mass mobilization of working people that we need to effectively pressure the ruling class and win the PRO Act. So one of the objectives in this campaign is to have as many chapters, members, and unions participate in this campaign as possible. That means we're going to be offering resources, training, and materials that will facilitate forming those relationships between DSA chapters and local labor unions. We have to remember that unions are member-led organizations that look out for the interests of workers. So that means unions are self-interested, rational actors who will get into motion when they determine that the fight will advance the cause of workers. So we're going to be working with chapters to make sure they're equipped to have conversations with unions and union members about the PRO Act. Getting buy-in from unions is going to be a vital component of this fight. Unions know how to fight, they have millions of members, and they can leverage their existing power to really turn up the heat in this campaign. So it's our responsibility as socialists leading this campaign, or being in coalition in this campaign, to be able to convey to them the importance and urgency of passing the PRO Act. As DSA members, we should be ready to explain why the PRO Act would be transformational and why we need the broader labor movement to support this. I'm confident we can do this because I've seen it done. DSA has some of the most committed labor organizers in the country. I've seen them help fellow DSA members organize their own unions. I've seen them stand on picket lines in Los Angeles for teachers and grocery store workers in New York City. And I know we can leverage all of that into a successful campaign. So now I want to talk a little bit about where we're going to be focusing our efforts in this campaign. So the Painters Union has done incredible work since the end of last year to make the PRO Act one of the central demands, if not the central demand, of the labor movement. They've been putting in tireless hours to build a real coalition with the muscle to bring this into fruition. They've done a great job at building a real analysis for a path to victory. And we now know that that victory is going to run through the Democrats in Congress. So, some of the senators that still have not sponsored the PRO Act include Kristen Sinema and Mark Kelly in Arizona, Joe Manchin in West Virginia, Mark Warner in Virginia, and Angus King in Maine. So the campaign will be prioritizing those states for their senators, as well as several House targets. So it should come as no surprise that 3 out of the 4 states that those senators come from have right to work laws on the books, something that the PRO Act would do away with. So it's also important in our analysis to include these, the terrain in which some of these states are fighting. And so with that, without a strong fighting labor movement, we have no real path for achieving a Green New Deal, one of the prerequisites for a livable planet. And one of the reasons I'm so proud to be a DSA member is because our organization and the work we do recognizes that the labor movement and the movement for environmental justice are part of the same struggle. So again, I'm thrilled to be a part of this, and I'm going to pass it off to my comrade Megan, who is also a DSA member and a freelance worker.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Megan Romer. I'm a co-chair of Southwest Louisiana DSA. I'm also on steering for DSA National Mutual Aid Working Group. I've been either a freelancer or what we call a permalancer for well over a decade. So I'm here today as a representative from DSA's Freelancers for the PRO Act group to dispel some myths about the PRO Act and talk about how it'll affect freelancers like me. And I don't want to be accusatory and say that there are a lot of bad faith arguments floating around, but there are some bad faith arguments floating around. I think there are also just a lot of people who are worried. We're socialists, right? We get that people get very concerned when their material conditions are under threat. And folks are worried because it's really scary, specifically right now, to have your material conditions under threat. 2021 is a very tenuous time for pretty much everybody. So emotions are high, misinformation's flying around. One of the biggest pieces of misinformation that's flying around is concerning something called the ABC test. So this is a basic test that is used to determine whether or not someone is or should be considered an employee versus whether they're should be classified as an independent contractor. Blanca explained it earlier. Misclassification of employees is a massive problem in a number of industries. We're talking about millions of people in construction, hotels, food service, trucking, meat processing, and so on. They're not getting the benefits of employment because their employers, of course, would just rather not, right? So the ABC test was part of a California bill called AB 5. And AB 5 did change things for a lot of freelancers in the state of California, mostly because the companies who use freelancers wanted to avoid having to give people employee benefits, right? And hire people as employees, when instead they could just hire freelancers from any other state. So this is part of why it's really important that this is national and that everything's national. So this law did hurt some folks, but it also helped a lot more folks move into more stable employment. But the big difference is the test in California applied broadly to all categories of employment: minimum wage, overtime, benefits, and so on. The PRO Act is using the same test, but it's only applying to a worker's recognition as an employee under the NLRA. That's it. So all it means is, for example, if a website has some staff writers and some freelance writers, the freelancers might, under the right conditions, be able to unionize alongside the staff. This is great. This is a good thing. Every worker deserves a union. Freelance workers are workers. And we're workers with very few protections. A lot of folks online will tell you they love freelancing and they love being their own boss. But I guarantee you that for every freelancer who's gloating online about their small business owner status, there are countless others who struggle to afford healthcare, who got into freelancing in the first place because of the cost of childcare, who do gig work because there's no other work to be had, especially as we've been seeing what's been happening to newsrooms, especially ununionized newsrooms. And a lot of people are freelancing part-time because their regular job doesn't pay well enough. You also see freelancing being done disproportionately by women, especially women with kids who need that flexibility, can't afford childcare, don't get maternity leave, and also people with disabilities who have a hard time finding truly accessible office settings to work in. None of that is an indictment of the PRO Act. It is all an indictment of the exploitative, violent, rotten capitalist system that doesn't provide healthcare, childcare, maternity leave, accessibility for people with disabilities, a living wage, sick leave, and so on. But you know how we change that? Solidarity, a mass movement, collective action, militant unions, coming together as the working class and demanding it. And I hate to center myself in people who are in my field because we really are a very small portion of misclassified workers overall, but we do have disproportionate influence and we're taking up a lot of air in this room with false info. So even for those of us who've built stable careers, it is absolutely incumbent upon us as workers in the struggle to recognize that we need to be in solidarity with all the people who don't have that stability, because we are thousands, they are millions. This won't affect us substantially unless we want to unionize, which we should, but it absolutely will affect them. And for me personally, I'm organizing in Southwest Louisiana. I'm right in the heart of the oil industry. I'm on the front lines of the disasters that it's caused. I spend my time trying to convince oil field workers that yes, the Green New Deal will take care of you. We're going to stand in solidarity as fellow workers, make sure you make a horizontal transition to a new job, a just transition, that your future as a person who provides for their family is safe. I can't say that in good faith if I can't trust that my fellow workers are willing to lay it on the line for me, or if I'm not willing to be in solidarity myself. So that's all I have to say. Solidarity, pass it on, and I'm going to pass it on to Kelsey.
Thanks so much, Megan. My name is Kelsey. I'm an organizer on Atlanta DSA's electoral committee. Over the past month or so, our chapter has been organizing around the PRO Act, trying to pressure our House Rep Lucy McBath of Georgia's 6th District to vote yes. McBath was actually one of 7 House Democrats to vote no during the initial House vote in early 2020, which puts our chapter in a unique position to organize on this campaign. As some of you may know, it's particularly difficult to organize in the South. Georgia is one of 27 right-to-work states, meaning that it's illegal for organizing workers to require union members to pay fees used to financially support the union. Unfortunately, these barriers are common in the South, which is home to 4 of the 5 states with the lowest union density rates in the country. Georgia ranks 45th nationwide in terms of union density, with only 4.5% of Georgia's workforce represented by a union, compared with a national rate of around 12%. Georgia's been a right-to-work state since 1947. Unsurprisingly, the origins of Georgia's harmful labor laws can be traced back to racist, segregationist policies from the Jim Crow era. The truth is, union membership in the US has been in decline for decades, starting in the late 1970s and followed by deregulation during the Reagan administration in the 80s. Between the 50s, at the labor movement's peak, and the end of the 80s, union membership nationwide dropped from 28 to 17%, leaving us with, as I mentioned earlier, a national union membership rate of 12% in 2020. So what can unions do for workers? It's essential that we remove these barriers which prevent workers in right-to-work states such as Georgia from bargaining effectively. Union membership leads to real material gains that can improve workers' daily lives. Union members can fight for gains like paid sick leave, employer-provided health insurance, higher wages, and increased job security, all of which are essential protections during a global pandemic. Union members are more likely to gain paid sick leave. Today, 86% of union workers can take paid leave, compared with only 72% of non-union workers. Similarly, 94% of union members have employer-provided health insurance versus 66% of non-union workers. Workers represented by unions have higher average wages, earning 11.2% more on average, even when controlling for industry, education, and experience. Finally, union membership leads to increased job security. At the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, union workers were better able to retain their jobs despite massive layoffs nationwide. So how would the PRO Act help? Despite the many benefits of union membership, lack of legal protections for workers stand in the way of effective organizing. Under current labor laws, employers can easily meddle in the organizing process. They can stall union elections, fire organized workers with little to no consequence, and control communications within the workplace, enforcing mandatory anti-union meetings and consumption of anti-union propaganda. They can also prevent workers from organizing over company email. The PRO Act would prevent employers from engaging in this behavior and enforce real penalties for firing unionized workers. Finally, the passage of the PRO Act would increase protections for undocumented workers who can be fired at will with little to no consequence, and allow misclassified gig workers to engage in collective bargaining. So why should Lucy McBath vote yes? McBath narrowly beat Republican Karen Handel in 2018, becoming the first Democrat to win the majority white upper middle class district since 1993. It's likely that with the 2022 House elections approaching, McBath is trying to not rock the boat in a district which has yet to solidly turn blue. Whatever the reason, McBath and the rest of the Democratic establishment owe support to the working class. Not only would passing the PRO Act protect workers, but public support for unions is actually on the rise across party lines. Union approval is at the highest rate it's been in the last 50 years. As of 2019, 64% of Americans said they approve of labor unions. If McBath really wants to win broad support from the working class in 2022, she needs to show she's here to support Georgia's workers over corporations. Finally, unions played a huge role in winning the 2020 Georgia Senate races, and denying their influence in the electoral sphere would be a huge mistake for McBath. So what our campaign in Atlanta DSA has looked like. Atlanta DSA's North Fulton County branch has been organizing past the PRO Act lit drops in the 6th district. We've organized phone banks and text banks to reach out to 6th district voters, letting them know to call and email McBath's office and pressure her to vote yes on the PRO Act. We have a webinar coming up in which we'll be speaking with local union organizers and a video ad series on the importance of union membership. And finally, we published an article on how passing the PRO Act would help Georgia workers thanks to a partnership with the local left-wing news publication, Mainline Zine. So in conclusion, I hope that hearing about Atlanta's campaign motivates other chapters to launch their own campaigns to pass the PRO Act. Passing this legislation would transform the labor landscape in this country and represent a huge step forward for organizing the working class. And for those of you that want to get involved, no matter where you live, you can go to the link on the next slide, bit.ly/email-PROACT to email your representatives and tell them to vote yes on the PRO Act. So with that, I will pass it to Rebecca from Phoenix DSA.
Thank you. Hey everyone, Rebecca Gorelli. I'm an educator organizer and strike leader with the Red for Ed movement down here. Teacher unionist, Phoenix DSA member, and on the steering committee of DSLC. So let's talk about Arizona for a minute. As of now, 45 senators are sponsoring the PRO Act. And if we get support of at least 50 senators, we can then figure out how we're going to get it through the Senate. Now that might mean, using special rules that allow the bill to bypass the Senate filibuster. It might mean bringing the bill up. And most importantly, though, it is about pressuring more senators to support it. So the bottom line is we need a majority of senators to support this bill to get the PRO Act taken up. And Arizona is absolutely key to making that happen. And there are only 5 Democratic or independent senators in the whole Senate who are not sponsoring the PRO Act. Right now, that includes both of our Arizona senators. So the PRO Act is about, restoring workers' rights and dignity in the workplace, which every senator should agree with. And we really need our 2 Arizona Democratic senators to support us on this key issue. Passing the PRO Act would mean creating big policy that meets this moment. And in fact, the PRO Act is especially important for Arizona. Union membership in our state is far below the national average. Arizona is a right-to-work state since 1947, and it has a very strong anti-union sentiment, which I've personally experienced firsthand through organizing a statewide educator mass movement and strike in 2018. Passing the PRO Act means weakening these right-to-work laws. Specifically, the PRO Act gives the workers the power to override these so-called right-to-work laws that prevent unions from collecting dues from the workers they represent. Arizona workers need the PRO Act. If we pass the PRO Act and enable more workers to exercise their rights and organize, that will mean higher wages, better healthcare and benefits, safer workplaces, and more dignity for working people across this state. And so finally, as you all know, and a reminder that Senator Sinema in particular, at one point in her life, and I know we have a little clip of her here, at one point in her life, she was a dues-paying member of our teachers union here, the Arizona Education Association, which is the state NEA affiliate. She should absolutely be on board with the PRO Act as someone who has previously been a dues-paying member and understands how important union organizing can be for all of us. And so, however, as you see in her thumbs down vote and her absolute failure to work for working Arizonas, the actual people that put her in that position, including myself, that move was horrific. And so over the past few days, I don't know what you all have seen, there's actually been a great coalition. This is a great coalition building movement. This filibuster and Sinema and this thumbs down now has built a massive workers coalition. And really what's been happening over the past couple days here, and I'll drop, actually, I have a tweet if you want to check it out. There has been multiple organizations joining together, progressive organizations already pressuring her by a multitude of actions. Specifically, the one I just dropped has been projections in the tallest buildings in the urban areas across our state, showing her what workers demand, right? Showing her we needed to end the filibuster, fight for 15, and now we are going to pressure for the PRO Act. And so Arizona workers have also built this amazing workers alliance called the Phoenix Workers Alliance, a coalition of workers and organizers with CWA, DSA, and educator unionists. Also, Arizona has a massive base of progressive movements, as you've seen this, right, through electing Democrats and really flipping the narrative here, not just in education, but on immigration rights. And so next up is the labor movement, right? And so as an Arizona educator, Red for Ed strike leader here, I totally understand, as do many other educator organizers, the need for a mass workers movement. The PRO Act is going to give all of us, our collective labor movement, a much needed boost. And in Arizona, our coalition builders are going to commit to pressuring Sinema by joining forces. As far as organizing around the PROACT campaign, the Phoenix chapter of DSA has already created an immediate action team, which includes dedicated, strong organizers, some of whom are educators. Because as educators, we know the importance of not only being able to join a union, we want others to join the unions because we understand solidarity, and that the more of us that join together, the better working conditions, benefits, wages for us all. And as unionists, we understand the solidarity piece and standing together. So with that, I'll pass it over to Gustavo.
Hey comrades, my name is Gustavo. I'm on the Green New Deal campaign committee, and I'm ready to win power for the working class. I'm really excited to be here with you all. Our first call to action tonight is going to be another poll. So Michael, if you could please put that up. So everyone please fill this out. We'll take a minute. Does your chapter have plans to get involved in DSA's National PROACT campaign? And the options are: we're already working on the campaign, we're not involved yet, but we want more info, or we're not planning on getting involved. So we'll give it a minute for everybody to fill it out. Fill out the poll, please, and then we can go on to the next slide. Okay, great. So our top call to action for this call is going to be a week of action, of intense field work from March 21st to March 28th. In my home chapter in New York City, we've been able to run aggressive phone banking campaigns, to have conversations with our neighbors who may not yet be politicized or radicalized. And as a result, we've won multiple state level elections. And most recently, we've had a massive field campaign of phone banking for tax the rich bills at the state level. And actually that's where I got my shirt, which is awesome. So I'm really excited to apply some of these lessons with comrades all over the country. In order to build power for the working class, we need to expand our numbers and bring into our movement the people who are not already in our movement. So we're setting an ambitious goal. We want to make 500,000 calls for the PROACT in the 4 states whose senators are not co-sponsoring the PROACT. This means we're going to conduct thousands of conversations between socialists and the working class, especially Black and Indigenous and Latino and other people of color. Then we're going to patch through and connect those voters to their senators. We're also planning multiple bilingual phone banks in English and Spanish, which is my native language. So if you speak Spanish, you're needed. We need you to sign up. And Thea's going to be dropping the link in the chat. We want to use this opportunity to connect field cadre from multiple chapters to create a coordinated national field operation for our specific 100-day campaign to pass the PROACT. But this is an opportunity, a model that can be reactivated, and it provides a model for future efforts. Our goal is to carry out a serious mass outreach operation, which is essentially the building blocks for how to run and win many more national campaigns to grow the power of the working class. We're going to have some field trainings for people who want to be field leads on March 14th and March 17th. And why does this matter? Why does field work matter? Basically, making 500,000 calls, it demonstrates a seriousness as an organization. It signals that we're in this to win and that we know what we're doing. And moreover, it's a threat. If we can contact 10,000 constituents to talk about a bill, we can do that to talk about another candidate or an organizing drive. Politicians know that and they hate it. They hate when we bring the struggle to their voters so that it's not just an insider Washington conflict. So right now, I need you to sign up if we want to reach our goals, of making 500,000 calls, we estimate that we need 200 members per shift. And so Thea's dropping the link in the chat to sign up. That's bit.ly/proact phone bank. I know not everyone is able to do field work, but if you're nervous about speaking to strangers, I want to ask you to push yourself to step outside of your comfort zone. If we say that we want to change the distribution of power away from the capitalist class toward the working class, we have to take the steps required for the mass scale of contact that we need to do. So this is just the first step. We're going to be recontacting supporters that we identify to join future actions, future escalations, town halls, and other tactics. So once again, please sign up for these phone banks. Thea's going to drop them in the chat. After this call is over, we're going to send an email to all the everyone who RSVP'd for the call, and that'll have other calls to action and ways to plug in as well. So next up, I'm honored to introduce our next speaker. Sara Nelson is a union leader who is the international president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA. Sara has been willing to say out loud what really needs to be done to build working class power. And I'm so excited to hear from her tonight.
Thanks, Gustavo. And I got to say an immediate thanks to Chicago DSA for the t-shirt. It's great to be with all of you. And I just want to start off and just say, we have power. Wait, take a second. Own it. We have power. The owner class tries to fool us into thinking that they have all the power. They have money, they have control. We have power. Mother Jones said in 1906, when she was fighting against child labor, the capitalists say there is no need of labor organizing, but the fact that they themselves are continually organizing shows their real beliefs. The capitalists are always organizing, and especially for the next crisis. And we are in crisis. The crisis is clear. Our world is burning from the Amazon to the Arctic. And in Texas, our friends and neighbors were freezing while Ted Cruz headed off to Cancun. But he did something that he's never done before. He was shamed into changing his ticket to come back early because people did not let him off the hook. I want you to take that in for a minute, because this is someone who wouldn't even stand up for his own wife or his father. And you shamed him into changing his ticket and coming back to Texas. Don't ever write any of these people off. Don't think about it in terms of party. Think about it in terms of our power and the fact that we are not going to leave workers stranded in states that are red states or communities that are red communities. There is no borders for labor. There is no borders for working people. And we're going to stand together, and solidarity is what gives us the power. It's the antidote to everything. It's the antidote for environmental justice, racial justice, gender justice, economic justice. Solidarity will help us win. But solidarity can be lasting when we organize our unions, because we have real legal standing with our employers. How do you take on a trillionaire, the richest guy in the world? You stand together in Bessemer and form your union. It's extraordinary what those workers are doing there, but what they are doing is they are organizing to get real legal standing, lasting legal standing, to take on the most powerful corporation arguably in the world. And we stand with them. And it is no small thing that the President of the United States said that he stood with them, said that workers have rights. Because DSA, you are incredible at agitating, at calling out what's wrong, at saying what we need to fix, defining the problem. You're incredible at that. But the truth is that people want to be a part of the popular notion. And what companies have tried to do in a multi-billion-dollar anti-union business is to shame workers out of joining the union, to say that it is anti-corporation, to have people be tied to their company, to make us believe that it's corporations that are looking out for social justice, when in fact it has been unions that have fought for social justice, that have brought capital to the fight. Look at Amazon saying that they are fighting for the $15 minimum wage. Bullshit. They're fighting to keep their own control and their own money, because paying $15 an hour is no big deal for them. When they can deny people their rights at work, when they can treat them as disposable, when they can send them into unsafe work conditions, and when they can retaliate against them for trying to form a union. Now, we're going to win this fight because we're doing it strategically. And this kickoff tonight is making us stronger, making it more possible for workers to join unions. Because many people will say, are we going to get the PRO Act passed? Well, sitting here today, no, we're not. It's a chicken and egg concept. Labor unions have been on decline. Union power has been on decline. And that has meant that the laws have steadily gone against us. So how do we get the PRO Act passed? We organize more unions. We organize in the millions. We're coming off of a shared experience here, where people understand that it is not just at their company, in their workplace, or in their careers. It is not just someone on an assembly line standing next to someone else who is a permatemp at GM. Those workers stood together and understood in order to raise the roof, they had to lift the floor. They had to bring everyone together and get everyone the same rights. That's why we're going to get rid of misclassification of workers in the PRO Act. And that's why we are going to get rid of the prohibition on the secondary strike. Because we have to have the ability to use our power as workers to stand up for other workers. As long as one can be mistreated, we're all in jeopardy of being mistreated. That will also be fixed with the PRO Act. But let's remember too, that there are no illegal strikes. There are only unsuccessful ones. So as you organize for the PRO Act and you help people understand what they can expect, as you raise expectations, if you think about it a few years ago, nobody thought it was possible to be talking about a $15 minimum wage. And now it is the popular notion in the country. And we are shaming politicians right now for their votes. But we have to shame all of them. We have to hold all of them accountable. So defining the problem, as you're doing tonight on this call, is the first step in winning. Setting your clear demands is the second step, and helping people understand what that means. So this can't just be a campaign on Twitter where we put #ProAct over and over again and expect that somehow we're going to win. We have to take the fight into every single community, help every single worker know what they can expect with their employer. Take the words of the President of the United States into those workplaces, into those communities, and say that the law says and our country demands that we encourage unionization. Our democracy depends on it. Beating back fascism depends on it. Getting the Green New Deal depends on it. So that's what we're talking about tonight. And as you talk about this, you are going to give people more power to be able to rise up in their workplace and join unions. 50 million people want to join a union. So when I say we're going to organize in the millions in the next couple of years, that is no underestimation of what we can accomplish together. This campaign is about building power right now. As you do this, you are going to be building power because we will increase the ranks of our labor movement. And in doing so, we will build that political power, not because we're part of a party, but because we are part of the working class. And every single elected representative answers to us. When we ended that government shutdown on January 24th, the Congress voted to continue the shutdown and not to approve a budget. On January 25th, less than 24 hours later, they voted for the same exact resolution and voted to approve it. Why? Because a few flights were stopped in LaGuardia Airport. And they understood, the GOP understood, Mitch McConnell understood that workers were about to get a full taste of our power, and they could not stand for that. So they put an end to it. That wasn't about politics. That was about working people's power and defining the urgency of the moment and what we were willing to do to back up our demands. So that's it. Define the problem, set your demands, add the urgency. This is the moment. Our world is on fire. And finally, back up what we're willing to do to get this done. And you're going to be doing that with each of those actions that you're starting this week. You're going to make this more popular. You're going to get reporting around this. You are making people take action. You are shaming people into taking action, and you are going to make this the popular idea that ultimately wins. That's how we're going to win. That's how we always do it together. And let me just say, people look at my bookcase all the time. I'm going to actually take a book out of it. This is Mother Jones' autobiography. And so I just want to close out with where we're going, with where we have to go, what she said over 100 years ago that we still have to hang on to today. Because we are in this struggle, but we can be glad that we are in this struggle. Because every single day that we fight, we get stronger. We exercise that muscle. We remember what it means to stand together. We remember what it means to understand that we have way more in common than anything that can divide us. And those that seek to distract us and demoralize us from taking action, we will not give them that power. I do want to ask one thing of you before I close out with this final quote from her autobiography. I do want to ask that you not write off anyone. When you do that, you are handing them your power. Shame them, hold them accountable. Do not write one of them off. Do not say Mitch McConnell will never let it happen. Hold the members of his caucus individually accountable for their votes and their actions against the people in their states and in their communities. And let the people in those communities know that you have their backs. When we write those people off, we are abandoning those communities too. And we do not abandon a single worker. We stand together always and lift them up and lift each other up, and that is how we win. And so Mother Jones said in her final words of her autobiography, in spite of oppressors, in spite of false leaders, in spite of labor's own lack of understanding of its needs, the cause of the worker continues onward. Slowly, his hours are shortened, giving him leisure to read and to think. Slowly, his standard of living rises to include some of the good and beautiful things of the world. Slowly, the cause of his children becomes the cause of all. His boy is taken from the breaker, his girl from the mill. Slowly, those who create the wealth of the world are permitted to share it. The future is in labor's strong, rough hands. Mother Jones was organizing with the United Mine Workers of America, who were some of the first to fight for environmental laws in their own workplaces, environmental justice so that the coal companies couldn't poison their water or their air in their communities. We cannot write them off either. We have used the excuse of environmental laws to shift good union jobs into non-union corporations. That's the truth. This narrative, this dishonest narrative that was referenced earlier tonight, that the environment is against the labor movement, is false, and we have to reject it. We have to have each other's backs. We have to prove that we're serious about just transition, about good jobs. And that starts with giving all workers power to face their employer on equal standing and to stand in the union hall and hear each other's ideas and backgrounds and different needs and form our demands together by listening to each other, caring for one another, and having each other's backs. That's how we win. Thanks so much, DSA. Let's go do it.
Thank you so much, Sara Nelson. I'm like vibrating and also crying and also so inspired to be in the struggle with you and with everyone on this call. I think it's totally clear now to everyone here that we only win when we organize, when we do the work, when we realize the power that we can only exercise as a collective. So as my comrade Gustavo said earlier, We need every single one of you and all of your chapters to make 500,000 phone calls in key states to pass the PRO Act. We're going to have a huge phone bank push coming up March 21st through 27th. We need y'all to sign up. The link is being dropped in the chat. We have nothing to lose and a world to win. Workers and the world unite. Thanks so much for coming.